When I look back at October 23rd, 2018, it feels like I'm watching someone else's life through a foggy window. I was 24, a community college student chasing a photography degree I wasn't sure I'd ever finish. My nights belonged to a 7-Eleven on the edge of Salem, Oregon, where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the regulars were a mix of truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional teenager looking for energy drinks. Working those late shifts gave me something I needed. Money, sure, but also solitude. After locking the register and wiping down counters smeared with coffee rings, I'd wheel my old bike out back and pedal through the industrial district. That's where the magic happened. Abandoned warehouses, cracked parking lots, buildings left to rot under the moon. My camera hung around my neck like a talisman, and I'd stop wherever the light caught something interesting. A rusted loading dock. A brick wall covered in faded graffiti. Architecture fascinated me, especially the kind people abandoned. Those places held stories nobody bothered to read anymore. My life had pressed me into frugality early. Dad died when I was 16, a semi-truck ran a red light and that was that. Mom worked double shifts as a nurse just to keep our apartment. College was something I fought for with scholarships and long hours, and the 7-Eleven was just another stepping stone. To stretch every dollar, I avoided ride shares and gas. My bike was freedom and necessity rolled into one. The route home cut straight through the industrial zone, past 4 massive warehouses that used to house a furniture company before it went bankrupt. It shaved off 3 miles compared to taking Highway 22. 15 minutes saved, and the quiet suited me. Marcus, my coworker, warned me about that route more than once. "Man, that area's sketchy after midnight," he'd said while restocking chip racks. "Just take Highway 22. I'd laughed it off. I'd been riding that path for 6 months without incident. Sure, I'd heard stories. Someone got jumped near the old factory last year, but that felt distant, like something from a true crime podcast, not real life. The shift ended at 2:15 a.m. I locked the doors, the cold air biting through my jacket as I unchained my bike from the rack out back. October in Oregon meant frost on the handlebars and breath turning to fog. Half the streetlights were dead, leaving long stretches of road lit only by the thin crescent moon. I plugged in my earbuds, some indie rock playlist keeping me company, and started pedaling. The industrial district felt like another planet at night, empty, silent except for the scrape of my tires on cracked asphalt and the occasional rustle of a raccoon digging through trash. I passed the first warehouse, its windows dark and shattered, then slowed near the second one. There was this wall, red brick covered in old graffiti, the kind that had weathered into something almost beautiful. I stopped, leaning my bike against the concrete, and pulled out my camera, adjusted the ISO, framed the shot. The moon gave just enough light to catch the texture. That's when I saw the headlights. They came from behind, crawling forward at a pace that felt wrong. Too slow to be someone just passing through. I glanced over my shoulder. A pickup truck, dark-colored, maybe navy or black, hard to tell in the dim light. It rolled closer, then stopped about 50 feet back. I turned back to my camera, figuring it was a security guard or maybe a late shift worker. But the truck didn't pass. It just sat there, engine idling low. I snapped the photo and packed up my camera, a prickle of unease starting at the base of my skull. When I got back on my bike and started pedaling, the truck followed. Not fast, not aggressive, just there, matching my speed, keeping that same 50-foot distance. I told myself it was nothing. Coincidence. Maybe they were heading the same direction. But when I sped up, so did they. I reached the old factory parking lot, a sprawling stretch of faded lines and rusted shopping carts scattered like abandoned toys. My heart thumped harder now, adrenaline sharpening everything. I stopped, pulling over to the side, letting the truck pass, but it didn't pass. It rolled forward another 100 feet, then stopped. The engine kept running. I stood there, one foot on the pedal, one on the ground, phone in my hand, pretending to check messages. My hands were shaking. Then the headlights went out. The engine cut. Total silence pressed down like a weight. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow. Then the door opened. Not a slam, just a soft creak. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, boots on asphalt. I looked back. A figure stood near the truck, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, hands stuffed in pockets. I couldn't see the face. My throat tightened. "I'm just taking photos, man," I called out, my voice cracking. "No problem here." No answer. The footsteps continued, steady, unhurried. I jumped on my bike and pedaled hard, legs burning as I shot forward. Forget the main route. I veered left into the narrow alley between two warehouses, swallowed by shadow. The moonlight couldn't reach here, just black walls rising on either side. My tires crunched over gravel and broken glass. Behind me, the engine roared to life. Headlights flooded the alley, my shadow stretching long and warped against the corrugated metal. I took a sharp right into the container yard. Dozens of old shipping containers sat rusting in rows, gaps just wide enough for a bike but too narrow for a truck. I squeezed through, my handlebars scraping metal, and ducked behind a container that smelled like oil and decay. I killed my phone screen, crouched low, and tried to breathe quietly. My heart hammered so loud I thought they'd hear it. The truck circled outside. I could hear the engine growling, tires crunching slowly over gravel. They were searching, hunting. Minutes stretched like hours. My legs cramped. Sweat soaked through my shirt despite the cold. I peeked through a gap in the containers and saw the headlights sweeping back and forth, methodical. Then the engine stopped again. Silence. I waited 10 minutes. My lungs ached from holding my breath. When I finally convinced myself they were gone, I crept out, walking my bike quietly toward the east exit of the container yard. It led out to Highway 22, the main road. Safety. But when I got close, I saw it. The truck, parked sideways across the exit, lights off, waiting. My stomach dropped like a stone. They knew this place. They'd predicted where I'd run. Panic clawed up my throat. I spun around, pedaling south now toward the old fence line. There was a gap there, a hole in the chain link big enough to crawl through. It led into a residential neighborhood. Houses, people, help. But to get there, I had to cross an open stretch. No cover, just moonlight and 50 yards of empty ground. The truck's engine started. Headlights blazed. I pedaled harder than I'd ever pedaled in my life, legs screaming, lungs burning. The roar of the engine filled my ears, getting closer, louder. I jumped off the bike while it was still moving, hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my shoulder. I scrambled on hands and knees toward the fence. The barbed wire at the top was rusted, broken in places. I found the gap and shoved myself through, the metal tearing my jacket, scraping my arms. I fell onto the other side, onto grass, into a yard with a white picket fence and a porch light glowing yellow. I ran to the nearest house and pounded on the door. "Help! Someone's chasing me." Inside, a dog barked. Lights flicked on. An older man opened the door, eyes wide, gray hair sticking up. "I'm calling the cops," I gasped, fumbling with my phone. He let me in. His name was George, a veteran in his 70s who didn't ask questions, just handed me water I couldn't drink because my hands were shaking too hard. I dialed 911, told the dispatcher everything. A truck chasing me through the industrial zone, couldn't see the license plate, dark colored, maybe Navy. The operator said officers were on the way. In the distance, I heard sirens. And then I heard the truck's engine rev hard and fade into the night. 2 officers arrived, took my statement, asked if I got a look at the driver. I hadn't, just a shape in a hoodie. They said the industrial area had been a problem. Homeless camps, drug deals, 2 assaults last year. They'd patrol tonight, but their expressions told me everything. Guys like that, they vanish fast. George let me stay until my mom could pick me up. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights, heard footsteps. The next morning, I called my manager and quit the night shift. Marcus came by later with coffee and donuts. He didn't say "I told you so," just listened while I talked, hands still trembling. "You're alive," he said quietly. "That's what matters." I switched to evening shifts, stopped riding through the industrial zone, stopped taking photos at night. My camera sat in a drawer for 2 months untouched. I bought pepper spray, kept it clipped to my belt. Started taking Highway 22 even though it added 15 minutes. Time didn't matter anymore. Safety did. A month later, I saw a news article. Police arrested 3 men connected to a string of assaults and robberies in the industrial district. They targeted cyclists and pedestrians at night. Gang initiation, the article said. My blood ran cold. That was them. Had to be. Now in 2024, I've graduated. I work as a photographer for a local newspaper. I still love photography, but I never shoot alone at night. I've learned that safety isn't something you assume. Survival sometimes comes down to luck and split-second decisions. That night taught me to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Run. Don't think, just run. And never ever believe it can't happen to you, because it can. It almost did. My name is Jake Morrison. I was 26 years old in 2015 when I found myself working the night shift at an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. I had dropped out of college a year earlier, still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The night shift paid a little more, and I needed every extra dollar to chip away at my student loans. The job was simple enough. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., alone in a massive warehouse, checking incoming shipments, logging inventory, and making sure everything was secure. I liked the quiet. I could listen to podcasts, read between tasks, and not deal with the usual office politics. That Friday night in November, I packed my thermos with coffee, pulled on my thick hoodie, and headed in. The rain was light, just a drizzle, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and pine. I had no idea that night would change how I looked at every locked door for the rest of my life. The first few months on the job had been uneventful. The warehouse was huge, rows of metal shelving stretching up to a ceiling lined with fluorescent lights that flickered occasionally. I got used to the sounds pretty quickly. The hum of the HVAC system, the occasional scurry of a mouse, the wind rattling loose panels on the loading dock. My coworker on the day shift was Marcus, a guy in his 40s who left detailed notes about what needed attention. The morning security guard was Mr. Miller, a 60-year-old man with kind eyes and a thermos that smelled like strong black coffee. We only overlapped for a few minutes during shift changes, but he always asked how my night went. I would patrol the aisles every 2 hours, clipboard in hand, checking off sections. There was this old container in the far corner, blue and rusted, with a heavy lock that looked like it had been there for years. It was not on any of my inventory lists. I asked Marcus about it once. He shrugged and said it was old stuff waiting to be disposed of, told me not to mess with it. I did not think much of it after that. That Friday night started like any other. I clocked in, waved to the evening crew as they left, and settled into the small office near the front. The desk was cluttered with shipping manifests and a dusty computer that took forever to boot up. I poured myself coffee, put on a true crime podcast, and started going through the paperwork. Around 1:30 in the morning, I heard something from the back of the warehouse. A metallic sound, like something scraping against steel. I paused the podcast and listened. Silence. I figured it was just the building settling or maybe a rat. I went back to my work. 30 minutes later, it happened again. This time it was longer, more deliberate, like someone was trying to pry something open. My heart picked up pace. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the sound. The warehouse felt bigger at night, the shadows deeper. When I reached the old container, I shined my light on the lock. It was still intact, but there were fresh scratches on the metal around it, bright, unoxidized marks. Someone had been here. I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. No response. It was the middle of the night, of course he was asleep. I stood there for a moment, staring at those scratches, then turned and walked back to the office. My hands were shaking a little. I told myself it was nothing, but I could not shake the feeling that something was off. At 3 in the morning, I was sitting at the desk trying to focus when the walkie-talkie crackled to life. Static, then a deep male voice. "You still there?" I jerked upright, nearly spilling my coffee. I did not recognize the voice. I grabbed the radio. "Who is this?" Marcus. Silence. Then the voice came back calm and measured. "We need what's inside, don't make this complicated." My spine went cold. "Inside what? Who are you?" No answer. I checked the frequency. It was the internal channel, the one only Marcus, Mr. Miller, and I had access to. I tried calling Mr. Miller. No answer. He would be asleep getting ready for his 7 a.m. shift. I called Marcus, straight to voicemail. Panic started creeping in. I locked the office door and pulled up the security camera feeds on the old monitor. Only 3 cameras worked and none of them covered the area near that container. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone talked to me on the radio. They would think I was paranoid or pranking them. I sat there, staring at the screens, my coffee going cold. At 3:45, I heard noise at the loading dock, the back entrance where trucks delivered shipments during the day. I switched to the grainy camera feed that barely covered that area. 3 figures stood outside. 2 men and a woman, all wearing dark jackets and baseball caps pulled low. One of them was working on the lock. My heart hammered in my chest. I turned off the office lights and crouched behind the desk, keeping my eyes on the monitor. The radio crackled again. "Open the door." "We know you're alone." I did not respond. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I dialed 911 and kept my voice low. "Someone's breaking into the warehouse where I work. I'm alone." The dispatcher asked for the address. I gave it to her, my words tumbling out. She said officers were on the way, 15 minutes. 15 minutes felt like an eternity. I heard the sound of metal breaking. They were inside. I could hear footsteps echoing through the warehouse, voices speaking in low tones. The radio buzzed again. "We don't want you, just open the container, give us the code." I had no idea what code they were talking about. I whispered into the phone, "They're inside." The dispatcher told me to stay hidden and stay on the line. At 4:10, I heard the unmistakable sound of a power tool cutting through metal. They were at the container. The screech of the blade against steel made my teeth hurt. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching my phone. Then, like a miracle, I heard sirens in the distance. Faint at first, then growing louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the high windows. The cutting stopped. Voices shouted, "Cops, move!" The sound of running footsteps pounded through the warehouse. They were heading for the back exit. I did not move. A loud knock on the front door. "Police, is anyone inside?" I unlocked the office and stumbled out, my hands up. "I'm here, I work here." 2 officers entered, flashlights sweeping the space, hands on their holsters. "Are you hurt?" the female officer asked. I shook my head, my voice barely working. "They wanted something in that container. I don't know what." The officers moved through the warehouse, finding the broken lock on the loading dock and the half-cut lock on the container. But the 3 people were gone. One officer radioed for backup while the other took my statement. They found the angle grinder on the floor, still warm, and boot prints in the dust. By morning, the warehouse was swarming with police. Mr. Miller arrived, his face pale with shock. Marcus showed up too, looking rattled. The police opened the container under supervision. Inside were boxes of old documents, files from the 90s, related to a financial fraud case that had never been fully resolved. There were names, records, evidence that someone clearly wanted destroyed or retrieved. The detective explained that the warehouse used to belong to a company that went bankrupt years ago, and this container had been forgotten in the shuffle. I had no idea any of this existed. The police took my statement, reviewed the camera footage, but the angles were too poor to identify the intruders. They opened an investigation, but no arrests were ever made. The company moved me to the day shift and hired 2 security guards for nights. I was grateful to be alive. If I had confronted them, if I had tried to be a hero, things could have ended very differently. Weeks passed, but I could not shake it. Even on the day shift, I jumped at sudden noises. The sound of a walkie-talkie made my stomach twist. I started locking my apartment door twice, checking the windows before bed. Those 3 people were never caught. The detective said they probably left the state. I learned that danger does not always announce itself. A normal night shift can turn into a nightmare without warning. I also realized that staying calm and calling for help saved my life. If I had tried to stop them, I might not be here to tell this story. Now, whenever I drive past that warehouse, I think about that night. The voice on the radio, the three figures in the loading dock, the scream of the metal cutter. I think about what was in those files, about who those people were, and why they were so desperate to get them back. Some secrets stay buried for years, and when they resurface, they bring danger with them. I never forgot the lesson I learned that night. Safety is never something you can take for granted. You have to stay alert, trust your instincts, and never assume you're truly alone. Some nights still haunt me, but I'm alive, and that's what matters. I got the call on a Tuesday afternoon. The voice on the other end was professional, detached. They needed a night security guard for a warehouse complex outside Portland. The pay was decent, better than anything else I had found in 3 months of searching. I said yes before I could think too hard about it. My name is Jake. I am 27 years old. I used to be a photographer, not the wedding kind or the corporate headshot kind. I wanted to capture real moments, the kind that told stories without words. I spent 2 years in community college studying it, saved up for a decent camera, built a portfolio. I thought I had a future in it. Then Marcus died, my older brother. He was working construction on a high-rise downtown when the scaffolding gave out. They said it was quick. I do not know if that makes it better or worse. What I do know is that after the funeral, I could not pick up my camera. Every frame I looked through reminded me of everything I had lost. Every click of the shutter felt like a lie. Bills do not stop when grief starts. Rent was due. Student loans kept coming. I needed work fast, and photography jobs were not exactly lining up. So when the security company called, I took it. Night shift, they said. Midnight to 8 in the morning. I figured the quiet would be good for me. Maybe the silence would help me sort out the noise in my head. I drove out to the warehouse on my first night. It sat about 15 miles outside the city, surrounded by empty fields and a cracked parking lot big enough for 50 trucks. The building itself was huge, 4 stories of concrete and steel with narrow windows that looked more like slits than openings. It reminded me of a fortress, something built to keep people out or maybe to keep something in. The inside was worse than the outside. The warehouse stretched on forever. Rows and rows of metal shelves stacked from floor to ceiling, packed with cardboard boxes, plastic crates, equipment I could not name. The aisles between the shelves were narrow, just wide enough for a forklift to pass through. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. My shift started at midnight. The guy I was replacing, an older man named Roy, barely said 2 words to me. He handed me a clipboard, a flashlight, and a walkie-talkie. He pointed to the desk on the first floor where I would spend most of my time. Then he left. I watched his taillights disappear into the darkness and realized I was completely alone. The job was simple. Walk the building every 2 hours, check the locks on the loading docks, make notes in the logbook. If anything seemed off, call the main office. That was it. Easy money, Roy had said, just stay awake. The first week I tried to ignore the small things. The flashlight I left flat on the desk rolled off and hit the floor. I heard it clatter, walked over, picked it up. Maybe the desk was not level. I did not think much of it. 2 nights later, I was on the second floor checking inventory numbers when I heard a door slam downstairs. The break room door. I knew it was that one because it had a specific sound, metal on metal, loud and sharp. I walked down to check. The door was closed but not locked. I opened it. The room was empty. No windows open. No breeze. I checked the security camera footage later. Nothing. No one had been near that door. I told myself it was the building settling. Old places made noise. Or maybe I was more tired than I realized. Grief does that. It hollows you out, makes you second-guess everything. I did not want to think about it too much. I just wanted to get through my shifts and collect my paycheck. It was my 5th night when things changed. I was sitting at the security desk filling out the logbook. The time was 2:30 in the morning. The building was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. Then I heard it. a metallic clanging from the third floor. It sounded like someone dragging a chain across concrete or maybe pulling a heavy shelf. I grabbed my flashlight and walkie-talkie and headed upstairs. The third floor stored industrial equipment, heavy machinery parts, metal brackets. The aisles were darker up there. Only half the fluorescent lights worked. I walked slowly, shining my flashlight down each row. Nothing. Every box was still in place. Every shelf looked undisturbed. I stood there for a minute listening. The clanging had stopped. I told myself it was pipes or the ventilation system. I walked back downstairs, sat down at the desk and picked up my pen. That is when I saw it. In the logbook under my last entry was a line of messy handwriting. It was not mine. The letters were shaky, uneven. It said, "Get out." My heart kicked hard in my chest. I flipped back through the pages. Nothing else was written that did not belong. I checked the security cameras. No one had entered the building since my shift started. No one had come near my desk while I was upstairs. The timestamp on the footage matched perfectly. I had been gone less than 10 minutes. I sat there staring at those two words, "Get out." My hands were shaking. I thought maybe the guy from the previous shift had written it as a joke, but Roy finished his shift at 11:30, half an hour before I even arrived, and the ink looked fresh. A week later, my flashlight disappeared. I had just set it down on the desk. I turned around to grab my coffee, turned back, and it was gone. I searched everywhere, under the desk, in the drawers. I even walked out to my car thinking maybe I had left it there. Nothing. I had to use the backup flashlight from the supply closet. It was older, heavier, the beam weaker. 4 hours into my shift, I went upstairs to the second floor to check a delivery manifest. That is when I found it. My flashlight. Sitting in the middle of the hallway between two rows of shelves. It was turned on, the beam pointing directly at an empty aisle. I picked it up. My hand was shaking. No one else worked the night shift. There were no cameras in that hallway. I called my supervisor from the desk phone. He laughed. He said I probably left it there during my last patrol and forgot. But I knew I had not. I knew exactly where I had left it. The next night, my clipboard moved. I left it on the desk while I went up to the fourth floor to check the emergency exits. It took me 15 minutes. When I came back, the clipboard was lying in the middle of the floor about 10 feet from the desk. Not like it had fallen, like someone had thrown it. I stood there breathing hard, looking around. The building was empty. The cameras showed nothing. I did not call my supervisor this time. I knew what he would say. I knew people would think I was losing it. Maybe I was. It was my 15th night. I was sitting at the desk drinking coffee, trying to stay alert. The clock read 1:45 in the morning. That is when I heard the footsteps, heavy boots on concrete. Coming from the third floor, slow, deliberate, walking down the main aisle. I grabbed my flashlight and headed upstairs. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe it was a trespasser. Maybe someone had broken in. I had to check. I reached the third floor. The footsteps stopped. I shined my light down each aisle. Nothing. Empty. I turned to go back downstairs. That is when I heard the voice. Low, almost a whisper, it said my name. Jake. I froze. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It sounded like Marcus. It sounded exactly like my brother. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. No one was there. But then I heard it again, closer this time. Jake, why did you leave me? My breath caught in my throat. This was not my imagination. This was not fatigue. That voice was real. I ran. I bolted down the stairs, back to the security desk, and sat there shaking. I pulled up the camera feeds. The third floor was empty. No movement, nothing. But when I looked at the feed for the second floor, I saw something. A figure, standing at the end of the hallway, facing the camera, tall, broad shoulders. The shape looked like Marcus. I jumped up and ran to the second floor. When I got there, the hallway was empty. Nothing. No one. I stood there gasping for air, feeling like someone was watching me from behind. I did not turn around. I walked backward to the stairs and went back down. By early November, I had moved my workstation. I could not sit at the first floor desk anymore. I took my laptop and logbook up to the camera control room on the second floor. It had a door I could lock from the inside. At least there, I could see every floor on the monitors. It did not help. That night around 3 in the morning, the lights started flickering. Not all at once, one floor at a time. The fourth floor went dark, then the third, then the second. I stared at the monitors, my heart hammering. On the camera feed for the first floor, I saw the boxes on the shelves start to shake. Not hard, just a slight vibration like someone was tapping them. Then one box fell. The sound echoed up from below. Then another box. Then another. They were falling one by one like someone was walking along the shelves and pushing them off. I stood up, my hands trembling. I grabbed the walkie-talkie and tried to call the main security office. Static. No signal. I pulled out my cell phone. No bars. I was cut off. The lights on the second floor went out. The control room went dark except for the glow of the monitors. I looked at the screen showing the first floor. A shadow was moving through the aisles. Not a person. The shape was wrong. It was darker than the surrounding darkness, moving deliberately between the shelves. It stopped in the middle of the hallway. It turned toward the camera. Then the screens flickered and went black. All of them. Every monitor shut off at once. I sat in total darkness. Just my breathing and the sound of boxes still falling somewhere below. I unlocked the door and ran into the hallway. My flashlight beam was shaking. I sprinted toward the stairs, heading for the main entrance. But when I reached the door, it would not open. It was locked. Locked from the outside. My key would not turn. I was trapped inside. I stood at the front door, shaking, pounding on the metal. No one would hear me. The warehouse was miles from the nearest neighborhood. No one was coming. I turned back toward the dark building. Boxes were still falling. I had to find another way out. I remembered the emergency exit on the fourth floor. It was not locked with an electronic system. It had a mechanical push bar. If I could get up there, I could get out. I ran for the stairs. I took them 2 and 3 at a time. My heart felt like it was going to explode. When I reached the third floor landing, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, steady, not my imagination, real footsteps chasing me. I did not look back. I kept running, up to the fourth floor. My flashlight beam bounced wildly. I found the emergency exit and shoved the push bar. The door flew open. Cold air hit my face. I ran outside onto the metal fire escape and down the stairs. When I reached the ground, I looked back. At the emergency exit on the fourth floor, a figure stood in the doorway, not moving, just standing there, watching me. I did not wait. I ran to my car, got in, and drove out of the parking lot. I did not look back. I did not return for my next shift. I called my supervisor and told him I was sick. A week later, I quit. He did not ask many questions. Maybe he was used to night guards quitting suddenly. I found another job, day shift security at a shopping mall. The pay was lower, but I did not have to face the darkness alone. At least not like that. A month later, I was working days. Sunshine, crowds, safe, normal. But at night, alone in my small apartment, something still felt wrong. I started drawing again. Not photography, drawing with pencils. Strange images appeared on the paper that I did not remember creating. Dark hallways, towering shelves, a figure standing at the end of an aisle. Sometimes, around midnight, I heard a metallic clanging from the hallway outside my apartment. It sounded like a chain being dragged across the floor. I never opened the door to check. I just lay still under my blankets and waited for the sound to pass. I never told anyone about the warehouse. People want reliable security guards, not someone who is afraid of the dark. But I know the truth. Fear does not disappear when you leave. It follows you. It waits. And sometimes survival is not about winning. It is about knowing when to run. I still carry a flashlight in my coat pocket, everywhere I go, even during the day. because I know the darkness is always there. And when it calls your name, you never really escape it.